That's right. We're here today for another session of Sesi Seni of the Spaces in Between. We have three individuals who helped put this wonderful two cities interstate event happening right here at the Hinbus Gallery. We have one of Penang's best curators, Ivan Gabriel, and we have Wanida, who is from Hinbus. She's the manager of the gallery, and all the way from Kuala Lumpur, we have Desmond Tong from ZHAN Art Gallery. Let's give them a big round of applause. And of course, to our lovely audience who are here on a Saturday. So, Ivan, we're going to start with you. I mean, I heard a lot of stories last night during the opening of like how you came about to start off this of the Spaces in Between.
So, Of Spaces in Between was conceptualized in 2021 during the third lockdown. And I decided to spend time conceptualizing an art exhibition instead of eating every day. I have always been very interested in the sort of idea of duality because as an artist myself, life and death and life within death and vice versa is very present. And so I wanted to further delve into the idea. But, sorry, it was a bus I was waiting for.
Lovely truck noises. That's all part of being here in Hinbus. All the traffic noises, everything, all very organic.
But I wanted to work with artists to conceptualize the idea because I think working with different voices would allow to help with the idea of duality. And to further the idea of duality, I tasked each artist to produce two works to play into the duality bit. And as somebody from the creative scene here, I've always been curious about how audience get to be part of an experience and the space. So with that, I decided to work with two gallery spaces to allow for the idea to be materialized in a manner where each artwork of the two that the artist will thereafter create would be seen individually. And I was not as adventurous as right now then. So at that point when the idea was conceptualized, it was meant to be two galleries in Penang, not one here and one outside of. And through the many postponements and lockdowns that we had, the idea had to be changed many different times. And once Abud started working on the app, Perk Reality in late of 21 and early 2022, the idea for duality became a bit greater when we realized that now we don't need a second venue to be in Penang anymore. It could be anywhere around the world basically, but I wanted to ground it and just have it be within two cities in the peninsula because it's easier to manage things. So I thereafter spoke to ZHAN Art Space and they were very nice to allow for the show to be done there. Hin was always my priority here because I think the idea appeases to the demographics and the people that visit Hin. I think they were quite like the sort of concept. So I knew Hin was always going to be my venue in Penang. But I'm also happy that we get to do it in a different city outside of the state. And through technology, we now get to connect both spaces and connect both artworks through Abud's app.
So I'm going to pass the mic to Wanida. So Ivan had mentioned that although he was planning many different things, Hinbus is like top numero uno priority. And I myself know that Hinbus has sort of been at the forefront of like, I'm not going to call it a movement, but I'm going to say movement, you know, of this young artist, exhibitions, as well as music. And of course, within a family-friendly environment. So, how did you feel about coming into the Spaces in Between?
I mean, I'm very happy that Ivan always includes us in most of the things that he curates or organizes. Yeah, I think it's an honor to actually be hosting this exhibition and of this particular format of collaboration and especially in between two cities. Yeah, we've always wanted to do something like that. We've had the previous one, which is Tujo, but that was a touring. So to have something going on at two places in one time, and for us to be a part of it is really great.
Right. So now, of course, we're gonna pass it on to Desmond. You were telling me a very interesting story last night when we first met about how this came about. It came from one. You were telling me the state of galleries in Kuala Lumpur, which are very profit-based. Not all, most. And then you tend to go more for an exhibition-based business model, which has its pros and cons.
Yep.
But it was the pandemic, and then you had actually met everyone during the Georgetown Festival, and then that's where this sort of materialized?
I think yes. I think that was the first time we actually came up from KL. So me and my sister both run the gallery in KL. We came up to see Ivan's Tujo show. That was where we actually met up with Hinbast and met up with Kenny from Penang Art District. And that sort of clicked for us to do something with Penang and KL. And I think we like to sort of focus on very creative avenues to do different exhibitions. That is our priority, to support the arts in Malaysia. And I think it came very naturally when Ivan shared the idea of any show basically, and it just interests us to know that we can be part of something that is unconventional. It's out of the box, and I think with the augmented reality, it takes the traditional artwork or exhibition a step further. We are now exhibiting works that both states can see simultaneously, and I think that hasn't been done ever, I think. Maybe, yeah. So our show starts next week, but essentially you'll be able to see the KL side versus Penang side, and I think that is very interesting on the whole, yeah.
Oh, it's definitely interesting indeed. You literally have artists from two cities and two galleries collaborating. And then, of course, let's pass the mic back to Wanida. We'll make it a back and forth, so it's very easy. Now, I've noticed that Hinbus has been responsible for a lot of artists starting out their artistic career. There are so many stories last night that I've came across so many people. They were like, I was doing XYZ, and then I had an exhibition here, and then next thing you know, they're full-fledged artists. So you as the manager of the gallery, was that ever the intent, or do you think it was just an organic happenstance?
Things always happen organically here. And yeah.
I see a little smile from Ivan here. Organically driven.
I think this is it's a meeting point for a lot of the creatives here, even of different disciplinaries. So yeah, I think for us, not being a white box, not being a gallery space, helps for the creative to explore, and hence we invite more newer upcoming artists to come here and play, basically. So because sometimes when you dive in straight into white boxes, it gives you already that, I don't know, there's a typical structure to it. So for me, I feel like it's a bit, well, for us as a space, we feel like it's a bit restrictive in a way. Yeah. I'm not criticizing the structure, but we just want creatives to really do whatever that they cannot do in those spaces. So we've always encouraged artists to push the boundaries. You know, you want to mix visual and performances, go ahead. You want to, network, go ahead. You want to do crazy things, go ahead. Because this is where you get to explore. That's why we don't call ourselves a gallery space, but rather an exhibition space. Yeah, so any form of exhibition is welcome here.
Wow, very well said. I didn't realize it was more an exhibition space rather than a gallery, but good work on what you've done in helping artists create their careers. Now, Ivan, back to you as a curator. Now, last night during the opening, I actually walked around and looked at the different art pieces, and one thing that I was awestruck with was not only did you have the traditional sketch and painting and realism, but you also had pieces like this, which are out of the ordinary, and each one of these paintings has an augmented reality element to it. And then on the farther side of the exhibition, there's a car horn. So there are these different elements. You have artists who are playing with digital technology. You have the traditional, and then you have those who are just trolling. So when you are curating an exhibition like this, how do you come up with these things?
Good question.
I'm sorry if I stumped you. I didn't mean to.
I always say I like curating artists because I get the opportunity to pick those that I know would help enhance the idea. So I normally start there, and then placing the trust, which is basically emotional blackmail, onto the artist and say, I trust you to do a good job, and then let them be. And 1 month before deadline, I text them. 2 weeks before deadline, I text them. 1 week after the deadline, I text them, because things happen after. And right after that, through collecting these narratives from these artists about the journey getting to the final work, as well as the final work itself, I get to understand what they're trying to convey better, and how that will play a huge role in the way I thereafter communicate how the show is going to be displayed. And with this show in particular, what I haven't done before for the past close to 6 years of being a curator here is working with 44 artworks, but only 22 get displayed, because they're actually 22 artworks in each space. But besides that physical aspect, I actually have to be incredibly mindful of how I present it as 44 works, because the augmented reality enables you to scan its counterpart and view the space with all the augmented reality works simultaneously with the physical works. So in being mindful of that, I have to really work around how do I present 22 physical and non-physical works. So that was the biggest challenge of this show and putting it up. I had to change my mind every 5 minutes, because every time the physical space worked collectively, it to some degree I thought hindered the way the digital or the augmented reality works played into the show. So there were a lot of back and forth. I spent a good near 2 days trying to troubleshoot that. And because I think playing with the space and the spaces in between, I need to ensure that there are a lot of rooms for people to wander through, and also being mindful of the fact that some of the works are perhaps lower than your typical eye level, and that is also because I target people with who come into the gallery on wheelchairs, children. So different people that have different eye levels, right? So it's also being mindful of that, because my aim, not only with the show, but in general, is just try to make art as accessible as possible. And what I'm really appreciative of what HIN can provide, and that's why this was always my option, is because this place is incredibly accessible to many different people, and in allowing for a space like this to be part of a show, it really furthers my agenda of trying to make art as accessible as possible.
All right, so we're going to pass the microphone. Very well said, though. I mean, I was very touched with what you said, Ivan. Wow, in terms of making art accessible, and the fact that you actually made certain pieces within eye level for those who are wheelchair bound. That's very commendable of you to make sure that everybody enjoys it. And then, of course, Wanida, I've noticed that as an exhibition space, you're sort of like the catalyst for a lot of creative endeavors like Ivan's and many others. And then there are also Penang Art District, who's coming in and supporting a lot. So you have these two elements, these two organizations who are very good at pushing the art scene forward. So my question to you is, like, within the industry of art, how important do you think it is for organizations like Penang Art District or Hinbus to exist? Do you think curators like Ivan or Desmond will be able to function if one day somebody snaps a finger and then it all disappears? Sorry if I stumped you. So, yeah, in terms of galleries and exhibitions and organizations like Penang Art District, do you think that the fact that you exist and Penang Art District exists is the reason why art is able to flourish as fast as it is in Penang?
Yeah, I really think so. Because I think for us, it becomes a support system for the creatives. It becomes a platform. Of course, I feel like the artists themselves can make it without, but having this in the ecosystem really helps to elevate everyone, and it it contributes to everyone's growth, the growth of the industry as well. So I think with everyone in the ecosystem playing the role really is important.
All right, now we're going to pass the mic to Desmond. So this one, I'm just really curious, because you have this, along with Ivan, this advantage of seeing two markets. You have the Penang art scene and you have the Kuala Lumpur scene, right? In terms of support and what you see here in Kuala Lumpur, are there any differences between the two?
Well, definitely. I think the biggest difference between Penang and KL, for me, is the vibe of seeing art. Art is sort of enjoyed and very well curated. In Penang, it's more of something you do, you pass time, you enjoy, you chat about it. In KL, it tends to be a little bit more on the investment side of things, and hence earlier when I mentioned KL has a little bit of a sales-driven market. It's not a bad thing, it's just a different business model, and I think it's because KL it's a little bit more established in a sense that art has been there for a long time, and the hipsterish art movement per se hasn't arrived yet. And I think drawing to what Wanida mentioned just now as a art space, so that's actually our brand name. We also don't sort of categorize ourselves as a art gallery. We consider ourselves an art space simply because we think that art can exist in any sort of space. So we are also in an exhibition space where we provide artists different the opportunity to do different things. So I think it was sort of very natural for us to work with Hinbus because both of us see art the same way. You can sort of do whatever you want within means, but to show that art can be very creative. It can showcase a car horn, for instance, and I think things like that changes perspective of what art means. It's not just on canvas, it's not just on the frame, and the value, of course it matters, but sometimes it also don't, because you can't really put a number on art, right? So sometimes people question, is banana with a masking tape art, right? But if you think it is, then it is. So we always encourage artists to break boundaries, have fun. I think art is something to have fun with. If you turn it into something very serious, then people won't really enjoy. I believe that. So with this exhibition, I hope that artists have the, like Ivan say, even though the stress of creating, but they have fun with the team, and then whatever results is rewarding. Yeah.
All right, I guess once again we'll pass the mic to Wanida. So this one's more on the venue perspective. Literally, when you were talking, Desmond, I was looking at that art piece of milk of carton. So my question to Wanida, to you as Hinbus gallery manager, like, what is the most out of the box art piece that you have ever seen, that you in your whole experience, where even you yourself were like, wow, that is something else?
We had. It's hard to pick out my favorites. But we had a show where there is a bowl of bones displayed on a pedestal. I don't know if you remember that.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. So those pedestals that you see, the curator actually displayed a bowl of bones on it. So that was interesting. What else? Gosh.
Well, you had a car here last time.
We had a car here, but it's a full car driven in and painted on inside the space. That was the previous exhibition. We had an anchor that is exhibited inside the gallery as well, a full-sized anchor that was made by Cheaping. We had crazy things here.
I'm sorry, we're talking about full ship anchor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds like it cuts the cake. So back to Ivan, the curator of the spaces in between. So in terms of the ideation of this exhibition, two cities, what is the most challenging thing you have found in bringing Penang artists to Kuala Lumpur and vice versa, Kuala Lumpur to Penang?
It's I think everybody sort of works differently. Artists here works very differently to KL artists, and for me, just trying to be aware of different approaches. And the challenge wasn't so much with the artist per se in like bringing Penang to KL to Penang. It was more trying to exist simultaneously in two spaces. That to me was the biggest challenge. So like right after this show this weekend, we do the same thing again in Kuala Lumpur in ZHAN Art Space the next week. So it's basically like on repeat. So for me, that is the biggest challenge of like doing this.
So, well, that was quite a short answer. Could I ask you another question? I don't want to make you feel like I'm singling you out. So the idea I wanted to ask was, so you have Kuala Lumpur's art scene, Penang art scene, both very different, right? And in terms of in what way are they different? Because in my opinion, and maybe to the layman, like an artist is an artist, but geography, location does play a role. So if you can compare artist to artist, what is the Penang artist like? What is the Kuala Lumpur artist like?
Oh, this is very tricky. I have worked with quite a number of Kuala Lumpur-based artists and beyond. So my answer would probably be based on that experience only, not my understanding of the scene per se. But I found Penang artists to be a wee bit more explorative with the way they present the works. So there's more, I want to communicate my idea. If it sells, but my idea needs to come forth. So I think Penang, we have that space to allow for artists to do that. And whereas I think it's KL, because it's quite competitive, and so there's no sort of room to go, oh, I can not bring my A game to this one perhaps, maybe, but you have to be like on it all the time. And so I think with that comes this sort of stress of being aware of how you present your work to the public and to the gallery also, because like Desmond also mentioned, the sellability aspect of an artwork needs to be very much present amongst collectors. So like you mentioned the milk bit. Yeah. So if someone were to acquire it, there would be questions about the longevity of the work and all of that. Whereas here, there's a leeway to allow for artists based here to be a bit more explorative in their practice and whatever they want to do specifically for group exhibitions.
More explorative. So would that translate to being more creative, or is that just a different approach, do you think?
I just think that translates to them being more cheeky.
More cheeky artists, okay. All right, I think we'll pass the mic to Wanida. I know I've asked you 3 questions. It was just I was on a thought process there. So Wanida, I mean, I sort of in a way grew up with this idea that art and business are like oil and water. However, you being in sort of in a way, Hinbus is a business institution, but dealing with art. How do you think that meshes well together, business and art? Because you have the creative, and then you have those who are more on the orderly business side of things, order and chaos, so to speak. How do you think those things mesh with each other, or can they not?
As a profession, it has to, I feel, personally. Because if you are doing art as a career, I mean, unless if you're super financially stable, then, you know, it's a playground, it's a hobby. But as a career, I think all of us has to understand the business side of it as well. I mean, you know, you got to work hard and play hard.
So essentially, the adage that an artist is this aloof, crazy individual is actually false. The more successful ones are just as much organized as a businessman or woman.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've met like very business savvy artists, and I've met those who are of the opposite spectrum as well. But you know, no. But the thing is, we always have to check with the artists or where they stand, and also make them aware that the 2 sides of this is important for them.
All right, so let's pass the mic to Desmond. Like, in terms of the because we also talked a little bit last night about the business of what you do and how you had to grow it and branded it. So in terms of your perspective coming from Kuala Lumpur, in the city, as Ivan had mentioned, very competitive, right? Was there anything that you had to do or let go of or make changes to just to survive? Or do you think that Malaysia is ready for that new frontier where the creatives can actually get their work out?
Oh, that's a big question.
I can dumb it down for you if you want.
I think to answer the question, I had to break it down a few parts. Artists have to know how to create, but they also need to know how to sell. I think a lot of artists forget that just because you're an artist, you don't just create. So the challenge with us is to curate works that are interesting enough for people to see, but also tell stories to convince people that the artwork is worthy in that sense. We had to overcome a lot of skepticism, especially working with emerging artists. A lot of people's first reaction was, can art sell? Do people pay? And what is the value? And especially for younger artists, because they are nobody. But we found that a opportunity for us to work with artists, because if we don't support the younger artists, who is going to support the younger artists, right? And if you want to work with established artists, they have to come from somewhere. So there's always the chicken and egg thing for us. And when we first started the first 2 years, that was the struggle that we had. In order to overcome it, we worked with a lot of artists within the first 2 years. I think within the first 2 years, easily we worked with over 50 of artists to sort of skim through what can they do, whether their works are real. In a sense that I think with a lot of emerging artists, a lot of artists also test the market within first 2 years. If they don't sell, if their passion gets lost, then they no longer want to be in the art scene. And that is the challenges that we have with artists, is that actually personally, even I have an artist, we wanted to do a solo show, and every year the proposal just comes, but nothing happens. And I think that is something that as curators and galleries, we have to be very aware that, yes, the art industry is a very tough industry, but so is any other industry. Singers, actors, I guess in the entertainment industry itself, in the arts, it's not straightforward. It's not like, oh, if I draw something, means people would buy it immediately. It takes time for people to get used to your work, to understand your work. So there's a lot of challenges, but I think the end goal, it's very rewarding when people start to understand your work, when people start to appreciate, how much hours you put in, the idea that you put in. Then I guess whatever challenges that came before that, you kind of forgo it and then move on. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you another one, just to be fair. You're like, how do you draw the line between creativity and profit? Because you are a business establishment, at the same time, a creative establishment. How do you draw the line?
We don't.
Straight answer.
I think I mentioned this earlier. You can't really put a price on art, right? You can only put a price on the experience and the I would say the experience. So when we sell art to buyers, if they really like the artwork, you can see it in their eyes already. It is that piece, they're gonna get it. That is something that they want. And we try to sell artwork to those people instead. We don't try to convince you to buy the artwork. So it's not really it's not hard sell. If you love that piece, means it's yours and the sales comes through, and it's less stressful. If you try to convince somebody that this piece is something worth collecting, then you get very stressed up. And that is why we don't draw a line between sales per se, because it's very funny. We worked with an artist years ago, and then the first collection we took was previous works. It was all very big pieces, about 5-6 feet. And he was like, I couldn't sell it for the past few years. But when we put it in our gallery, within the first 2 months, it got sold. How do you explain things like that? You can't, because the demographic is very different. The clientele is also very different. Sometimes it is a matter of time. You do not sell artworks immediately sometimes. Sometimes it takes time to convince, to do marketing, and it also depends on if your house has a space, for instance. And if it does, then when buyers are willing to buy, then you seal the deal. So time is something that artists have to be very patient about. Just persevere.
I like the tone of the last one, persevere with an eyebrow.
I mean, that really is something artists have to keep in mind, that it might not work today, but maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. And that's usually our experience so far, that works get sold much later, but it eventually will. You just have to trust that whatever you do is of quality. And then,
So I'm going to ask one question just to balance it out, because I think I've asked everybody like 3 questions as the microphone was passing. So not the last question, but the last question before you pass the mic to Wanida is, so within the exhibition, how many of the artists are KL based and how many are Penang based? Do you happen to know?
No, that one I think I have to
pass it to Ivan. Don't worry, we'll pass the mic to Wanida and then I'll ask that one to Ivan. So Wanida, like, my question to you is, how important do you think that organizations like Penang Art District existing is important to building the scene, in your opinion?
It really helps that they are around. I can see the amount of support that they've been giving or providing into the industry, I mean, not just financially, networking. I think it also helps that they are very open to meet with the artists, meet with the creatives, talk with everyone personally, share not brainwashing, sorry, brain dumping and everything, and basically they also help to get creatives together, get everyone to talk to each other. I think in that sense, Penang Art District is really doing a good job in that.
Well done, Penang Art District. All right, Ivan. So, yeah, round of applause for Penang Art District. Yeah, the question I asked Desmond just now, I apologize. I think that was meant for you. I really wanted to know, within of the spaces in between, how many artists are from Kuala Lumpur and how many are from Penang? Because it is a two-city exhibition.
To play into duality, not my doing, but half of the artists are from here. The other half, whilst not from Kuala Lumpur per se, are based there, but now some of them are wandering around the world, so they're not quite based there. But yeah, it's evenly distributed, like the line is literally drawn in half.
50-50.
Yeah.
That's actually
Yeah.
a pretty good balance, and like you said, a good duality. So you were mentioning that some of them are traveling, like nomadic artists.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that work?
They base there predominantly, and then every now and then just travel around. So whilst I consider them based at that city, they do wander around. So yes, nomadic indeed. But to play into the duality of things, besides the artists, there are many accidental, coincidental twos in this show. Again, not my doing. You can ask Wanida and Desmond. So there are two pairs of siblings in the show. Maizol and his brother Firdaus, which is behind him. And to another pair who just arrived, the Chang siblings, Winnie and Hao. And then there are also two pairs of couples here. So this work right here, by Kimberly and Silas, I invited them separately as artists, but they collaboratively worked together for this one, and also White Bones. And there are also two pairs of two works. One is seen in Maizol's work, and another one seen in Mawar's work, which is right over there. And there are two installation works in the show too. So there are many coincidental twos.
This was not planned at all.
No, the only thing I planned in 2021 was when duality took off with two galleries in Penang. I scheduled it to eventuate on the 2nd of February 22. That was the only thing I planned. This one I didn't.
Okay, wow.
But it didn't come true, you're right. Joke's on me.
I'm actually quite awestruck that it panned out that way, where you had a two-city exhibition, and within itself there are many elements of duality and all those things, and the fact that you didn't plan it at all. Does that happen often?
No.
All right, let's pass the mic back to Wanida. I don't want to put you on the spot. So Wanida, in terms of your artist opinion, right? Like, you've obviously have worked with Ivan since he started curating, right? In the time that you've managed Hinbus and this exhibition space, how does an artist or a curator get started? Like, say someone like me, like, one day I wake up, I want to curate an exhibition, or I want to wake up, I want to create a weird carton of milk exhibition. How do I, as a normal layman person, get started, in your opinion?
I mean, like any other industry, I feel like you need to do your homework. You need to study it a bit. You might not get a formal education, but at least you need that experience of experiencing it. At least go to shows. Talk to the artists, talk to the curators, and things like that. And then, get yourself into the industry, but on a surface level, have that experience, and just get as much knowledge as you can of what's going on. And if you feel that it clicks with you, then you should explore it. If it doesn't, then it's like, no, maybe it's not your time yet. I'm not saying that it's not your thing. Maybe it's not your time yet. You can still start exploring and things like that. Do something, practice it, share it with the others, whether if it's the creative people or non-creatives. Just get things started and see how it goes. It's all about the journey.
And this one I want to ask Desmond as well. It matches what I asked Wanida, because two cities, two different perspectives. Is it the same in Kuala Lumpur, where networking is the best way to get into it, or do you have to do something out of the ordinary in such a market?
I guess, yes, networking is one. But with us particularly, we like to share stories. So usually what we do is we will ask the artist to tell us a story, as in not just the artwork story, but a story of your exhibition. And if you cannot come up with a narrative per se, then what are you selling? Because there is a difference between just painting beautiful artworks for display versus sharing a beautiful piece of memory or experience, or so that is something we sort of encourage artists to do. To tell a story, to convince people that your art, it's something. And I think that goes back to, I guess, hundreds of years. Artists used to be storytellers. Why do we go to museums to see art? They capture that moment. They capture a particular time. Unfortunately, I think at current times, because we consume so much stuff via social medias and stuff, that we sort of forget certain moments, and artists have the ability to capture that. And when they can do that, then it becomes a very good piece of work, because you capture the moment, you capture what people don't see and tend to forget. That is how we encourage our artists to do exhibitions, to sort of go beyond just paintings. Of course, technical is very important, your strokes, your color palette and stuff, but sometimes ugly art is also beautiful in that sense. You don't necessarily need to perfect every stroke to paint a good story. So that is our take on how we sort of encourage artists to do works. And I guess as any work, you have to sort of submit your proposals first. That's how we sort of evaluate your ability to carry a show.
What does that proposal look like? Is there a 16-point template?
Not really, but the proposal, it's just to show that you've thought about the work, you thought about the exhibition, how you want people to experience. And I think with Ivan mentioned something about being interactive, being it's an experience. That is something we want artists to sort of take a step further as well. You have to, whatever you do, you have to make sure that people understand. If you create an exhibition where people don't understand, then what's the point? Because art is very subjective, and if only you can figure out what you're painting, then it gets lost. The narrative gets lost in between. So it's not, and I think sometimes artists feel that because they're an artist, they should just paint whatever they feel, which is true, but ultimately you're painting for an audience, and they also have to sort of understand. And if they don't understand, then maybe you need to do more research on it to translate your work better.
So translate the work better, as in, how does that work out in execution? Again, sorry that this is like the third question on your turn.
Definitely doing more research. I think you have to know the audience first. You have to know the audience, who you're selling to. And I think that's why Penang and KL is slightly different. In Penang, again, it's more creative. You can do a carton of milk. But in KL, if you do that, I think people will have a lot of questions. Will they go spoil? Will it smell? How am I going to keep it? What's the longevity? And if you can't answer those questions, then maybe not exhibit in KL. So that's the difference. Whereas here, you have that leeway. So being knowledgeable is very important for an artist to know what sort of appeals to your audience. I guess that also goes back to maybe sensitivity. I think Penang has a little bit more openness and freedom to do certain artworks versus KL. So being on top of things per se helps you create. We can't do a lot of censorship artwork in KL, and that's a big thing that we try to sort of overcome as well. Like even nudity, I think recently some schools in Florida or some board was saying that David is pornography, which is very funny because that's been in Italy for thousands of years, and that's like the ultimate sculpture, but yet in current moments people think it's nudity, it's pornography, and yeah, so I guess art sort of has a transition period as well, but going back to your question, how do artists, they have to do their research, they have to know what works, and then just
So
learn.
sort of like changing times, modern values and
Yeah.
stuff like that, as opposed to in the Roman era, nudity was seen as divinity because that's how you were created.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Wanida, like in terms of what Desmond said, he said that the Penang community, the people visiting the galleries, they tend to be a bit more open, hence why the artists themselves are able to experiment. So from your perception, because I kind of figured that you've seen many exhibitions, many faces, do you think that's true in terms of the Penang populace? They're more open for artists to explore, they're more receptive of those kinds of works? Or same, different, but still the same?
Yeah, I think same but different. I think with Penang audience, it's I always get asked that what is this experience about, you know. That's to paraphrase every questions I've gotten for the last few years. So yeah, because it's not just about understanding, oh, what is this painting about, huh? But it's more of like, so what will I get from seeing this exhibition at the end of the day? Yeah. And it's also not about like, do I enjoy it or do I not? But it's like, what am I getting from out of it? Yeah.
All right, so now let's pass to Ivan, something more of the spaces in between. Do you think an exhibition like this, like what footprint do you think it would leave within the industry? Because I have yet to see another exhibition that has combined two different locations physically. Virtually, quite a few, but physically. So do you think moving forward, right, what does this mean in terms of exhibitions in general in Penang? Do you think we'll see a lot more collaborations, maybe even international collaborations?
I think now with the usage of technology, the possibilities are basically borderless, right? But yes, I do hope to see more this sort of infusing technology into a space, into a physical space. What I've been very curious about is the interactivity between audience and the physical work and the non-physical work. Because what I experienced yesterday during the opening was how people were trying to take a photo of something that isn't there. And I think that's actually quite interesting because the person who's holding the camera has to be very clear in communicating to the person on the opposite end how to interact with the work, but the person can't see what they're actually interacting with. I think that's just quite something. And it also, for me, helps with the ability to speak and communicate clearly, which is so important. And I found it very, very interesting. But moving forward, I do hope to see more. And I think with technology now, we get to sort of bridge the gap. And what I have loved about the show thus far is because everybody who come into HIN or any spaces, they always come in with their phones already on their hands. And I thought, how do I go from this to this? And through technology now, I'm feeding you an information which I want you to know. So now I get to tell you, here, this show, go check it out. And you get to experience it differently through, instead of the usual experiences that people would have with going into exhibitions and looking at just the work. Now you get to look at the work and just beyond that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of footprints, as you mentioned, it will leave behind. Digital or otherwise.
Do you think it's a big footprint?
One can only hope, but I think like many things in life and many things in Penang, also maybe the sort of aftermath of the whole thing would only be felt later on, not as immediate. Yeah. So ask me this in 3 months.
I'll come back to you on that one. So back to Wanida. So here's my question. Like, it was interesting. The question sparked when you mentioned about the augmented reality aspect of the art gallery. So this one is, I've noticed that.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, we can. Let's make this one round and then, ciao. All right, cool. So the question is, right, in this TikToker generation, right, is there a difference between how the generation of TikTokers and the elder generation consume art? Because Hinbus is known for its Instagrammable, TikTokable, ambiance. So looking at the two demographics, is there a different way that they consume?
I think so. With all the TikToking that's been going on, it's a lot of micro engagements, I guess. It's like they are engaging with the artwork and just the camera, and that's it. Whereas I think the different generation tend to have that as a conversation starter. Also because they usually come with their friends and things like that. So it is something to talk about to physical people. Or even if it's digitally, it's conveyed to specific people. I feel like with the other generation is purely like, I'm doing something with the art and I'm putting it out, so I am conveying it to the mass. Me, artwork, and the mass. So yeah, I think that's what I see. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I think we'll have that as the last question to wrap things up. And do you have any final words to say to everybody watching in regards to the exhibition? Ivan.
I'm trying to be
100 words or less.
Well, I suppose the show, one of the reasons why I wanted to explore duality is for us to be sort of just be mindful of our surroundings and to be aware of the duality aspects that surround our daily life. I suppose I can leave people with that nugget.
Beware of the duality. And I think we can pass it to Desmond. Any final words?
Join us next week, next Saturday, the gallery. I think it'll be a very different setting because we are a gallery space versus an exhibition space per se. And I think that will give the artworks a different justification and I think it will give a different life to artists. Yeah, so do come and join us next week.
And of course, due to the immortality of digital content, whether you are watching it and it is within the time frame, do visit the exhibition in Kuala Lumpur. But if you are the audience of the future, thank you for watching this Sesi Seni organized by Penang Art District. My name is Mo Nazrul for Penang Hidden Gems, and we are out. Thank you for watching. All right. And of course, the audience, thank you for being patient. I literally